At exactly 4:03 a.m., the deadbolt clunked back into place like the closing of a vault. Dina didn't tiptoe in. She floated, with the graceless swagger of someone who thought the hour gave her diplomatic immunity. Her heels clacked once on the hardwood before she kicked them off like a teenager sneaking in past curfew. But Tom wasn't asleep. He hadn't been for weeks. She smelled like someone else's soap. He didn't say a word, didn't flick on a light, just watched the silhouette in the hallway. His wife, wrapped in a faux leather jacket she hadn't worn in years, her hair a mess of curls that had definitely been styled for someone who wasn't him. "Don't ask," she whispered, with a smirk she didn't even bother hiding. Then she was gone. Bedroom door half shut, purse dropped onto the floor like a trophy. "Listen, quick break. We set a goal to hit 10K subscribers. So tap subscribe if you're liking these wild stories of betrayal. Now let's get back to the madness." Tom sat still on the recliner, his hands on the worn arms, fingers drumming the same pattern they had back when he used to conduct site inspections downtown, just before issuing a violation notice. He wasn't the yelling type. He never had been. Dina always took that as weakness. She called it being checked out. Maybe he was. Or maybe he was just finally seeing the damn scoreboard for what it was, a lopsided, rigged game where he kept handing over tokens, and she kept playing him like a claw machine, one that never gave prizes. He looked around the room, half lit by the glow of the cable box. The details were screaming, if you knew how to listen. The second wine glass from the night before was still in the sink, but he hadn't poured any. The hallway rug was misaligned again. Her phone charger was missing, and the guest towel, the monogrammed one she never let him use, was still damp on the edge of the hamper. Tom leaned forward, slow, like the air had weight now. He picked up his phone from the side table and unlocked it, not to snoop. Not anymore. That phase was over. He knew what he'd find. Instead, he opened contacts and scrolled. Past the neighbors. Past his bowling league. Past his retired buddies who only called when their backs were acting up or they wanted to complain about cable prices. He stopped at a name he hadn't tapped in 11 years. Alan Morris. There was history there. Not good history. Just unfinished business. The kind you file away under, "Not my circus, not my monkey," until your wife comes home at 4:03 a.m., smelling like hotel soap and someone else's expectations. He didn't call. Not yet. Just stared at the name. Then, like his body moved before his brain caught up, he stood. Walked to the hallway. Paused. Listened to her breath behind the door, erratic, half snoring, half muffled, like guilt trying to sleep in peace. He went to the garage. Not for a weapon. Not for a drink. For the box. It was behind the water heater, tucked in a beat-up filing crate under tax returns and a few contractor manuals from the early 2000s. The label was gone, but he didn't need one. He knew the weight of it. The smell of old toner and stubborn memory. Inside was everything he hadn't thrown away, because part of him always knew this day would come. Photos, receipts, printouts, a folded napkin with a phone number and lipstick she swore was from a waitress who liked the tip. And one thing more, an old USB stick. Scratched. Dirty. But the label still read, "Backups, personal." Tom blew the dust off it, carried it inside, and plugged it into the laptop she hadn't touched in over 2 years. It booted. Slowly. But it booted. And what blinked open in the corner folder marked "Miscellaneous" made Tom's jaw clench. Not with surprise. That was gone. No, this was worse. Validation. There she was. Dina. 11 years ago. Drunk at a holiday party. Sitting way too close to someone who wasn't him. The camera panned left just long enough to reveal a familiar smirk. Alan. Her old boss. They weren't doing anything explicitly damning. But they didn't need to. The way she leaned in. The look she gave the camera before flipping it off. The lipstick. The laugh. The timestamp. And that was the year she claimed she'd been working overtime to save the company. Tom sat back. And for the first time in weeks, he smiled. A cold, small thing. She said, "Don't ask." So he wouldn't. He'd answer. Tom didn't sleep. Not really. He closed his eyes for a few hours around dawn. But it wasn't rest. It was more like charging. At 7:02 a.m., he poured himself a cup of coffee, black, bitter, no sugar. Dina's mug was still by the sink, the lipstick stain on the rim barely smudged. He stared at it for a beat too long, then dropped it in the trash without a word. He sat at the kitchen table and opened his flip phone. Not a burner, just the same model he'd used for years, basic, unfashionable, but damn near indestructible. The contacts list was short. He scrolled, thumb steady, until he landed on a name he hadn't seen in over a decade. Alan Morris, Dina's old boss. Her mentor. The man who once sent her a leather planner with a note that read, "Only the best for my right hand." Tom hadn't forgotten. He pressed call. It rang 4 times. Then, "Tom." Alan's voice sounded older, drier. Maybe it was just early. "Yeah." Tom sipped. "Didn't expect you to pick up." Alan exhaled, slow. "Didn't expect to ever hear from you again. You remember Dina's Christmas party? The one at that Italian place, December 12th. A beat of silence. Then a tired chuckle. "You still mad about that?" "No. I'm mad about last night." Another pause. Longer. Deeper. The kind of silence you don't interrupt unless you're ready for consequences. "Tom," Alan finally said, voice low, "you really think she stopped after me?" Tom stared out the window. The rosebush Dina used to trim every Sunday had withered. Brown edges. Cracked stems. Fitting. "She said, 'Don't ask,'" Tom muttered. Alan let out a humorless laugh. "Yeah, she always liked getting ahead of the story." "I don't need stories," Tom said. "I need a favor." Alan didn't ask for details. Didn't ask what kind. Just said, quietly. Tom nodded, even though no one could see him. Quietly. "Fine," Alan said. "I'll send you what I still have." "But Tom." "Yeah, she's not the same girl from 12. She's sharper now. Meaner." Tom smiled into his coffee. "So am I." The call ended. Tom didn't hesitate. He opened his messaging app, the one he never used except for one person. Gary. His brother. 4 years younger. Used to work in loss prevention before getting licensed as a private investigator. The guy had a knack for smelling lies like spoiled milk. Tom used to tease him about wearing tinfoil hats. No? He was the exact kind of paranoid Tom needed. Tom typed. "Need a deep dive on Dina. Discreet. No noise. No favors." He hit send. 30 seconds later, Gary replied. "On it." That was all. No follow-up. No questions. Just a 2-word guarantee that someone other than Tom was finally watching her too. Tom leaned back in the chair. The sunlight was creeping through the blinds now. Upstairs, Dina was still asleep, probably dreaming of rooftop bars and filtered lies. He didn't wake her. He didn't kiss her forehead like he used to. Instead, he pulled out the yellow notepad he kept by the fridge for groceries and wrote a list. Lock title transfer with Diane. Check joint credit activity. Safe deposit box. Remove everything. Call estate lawyer. Redo beneficiaries. He stopped at the 4th line. Then, after a moment's pause, added a 5th. Tell her nothing. Because Tom wasn't building a case. He was building a stage. And when the curtain rose, she wouldn't be the one holding the spotlight. She'd be the act. One she didn't even know had already started. It started with a silver keycard that slid out of her purse one morning while she was hunting for lipstick. Not her usual go-to, the matte red one she reserved for PDA events and funerals, but something glossy and new, like she was trying to reinvent herself in someone else's fantasy. The keycard had a logo, not a hotel chain they ever stayed at. Certainly not one she booked for book club or yoga and wine weekend. Tom caught the glint of it on the tile. She noticed too, froze for a millisecond, then swept it up in a casual blur and shoved it into her makeup bag like it was an old receipt. He said nothing. He simply turned, walked to the hallway, opened the junk drawer, and scribbled one line in his ledger notebook. May 7 to 8:26 a.m. Hotel key fell from purse, Tri-Point Suites. That night, her phone was face down again at dinner. Every night it was. Always with the screen silenced, locked, flipped. Once upon a time, she'd text with the screen tilted toward him, giggling over cat memes. Now it was like she was guarding nuclear codes. Tom didn't bother trying to unlock it. That was for amateurs. Instead, he checked the online banking dashboard after she went to bed. Cab charge, 1:42 a.m., $39.20, 1437, Alcott Avenue, Tri-Point Suites. Minibar charge, same night, $28. 2 champagne splits. Tom didn't flinch. just copied the transactions into a spreadsheet he'd named Utilities, April. Every entry had a hidden timestamp. Every spreadsheet had a copy backed up to a USB stick that now sat tucked inside a cigar box in the garage freezer, next to frozen lasagna and irony. The next day, Tom visited the bank. Spoke to Marla, the branch manager who'd once flirted with Dina over interest rates. He asked about options to freeze co-owned lines temporarily for financial review. Nothing drastic, just insulation. By Thursday, Tom had his name so low on their car titles. By Friday, he moved 60% of their liquid savings into a trust in his niece's name, citing health uncertainty. The banker didn't ask questions, just stamped the forms. At dinner, Dina floated in late again, laughed something about a wine tasting that ran long. Her voice too chipper, her stories rehearsed. She wrapped her arms around him while he did the dishes, chin on his shoulder like they were still some blissed-out honeymoon couple who didn't live like polite strangers in matching robes. "Missed you today," she said, fake as sugar-free syrup. Tom smiled. "Busy day. Lots to think about." She kissed his cheek. "You're always thinking. You need to live a little." He wiped his hands. Turned. "You're probably right." But he didn't live that night. Not the way she meant. Instead, after she slipped into their bed and rolled over like guilt didn't exist, he sat in the garage and reviewed the footage Gary had sent, camera stills from hotel parking lots, timestamps, license plates. One of the men with her wasn't Rick yet. Just a younger guy with a smug jacket and a rental car. Tom added it to the file. He wasn't collecting evidence to win an argument. He was building momentum. Each lie she fed him was a brick in the foundation. And Tom, quiet, unassuming, checked out Tom, was stacking them like a mason who knew the final brick would be the one she choked on. At night, she curled close, legs tangled with his, her breath warm on his neck. Tom closed his eyes, and behind them, he drafted legal notes, transfer sequences, trust modifications, a backup alarm plan. She thought she had him, thought her performance was flawless. She didn't notice the way his fingers had stopped twitching in his sleep, because Tom wasn't dreaming anymore. He was designing an exit she wouldn't see until the locks changed. The video wasn't even high quality. Grainy, time-stamped, with that awful fisheye distortion cheap hotels use to make their hallways look longer and their sins smaller. But clarity didn't matter. Context did. It came in a Dropbox link from Gary, titled simply, May 9th, Suite 212. Tom opened it in the garage, laptop balanced on his knees steady like they hadn't been in weeks. He didn't even need to hit play. Just hovering the mouse over the preview frame showed enough. Dina, striding ahead in a black coat, hair curled, heels clicking. And behind her, Rick Turner. Tom actually blinked at the screen. Once, twice, then leaned forward as if closing the distance might change the outcome. Rick. Rick. They'd gone to the same union mixers back in the day. Rick had borrowed Tom's tools more than once, just for the weekend. Always returned scratched and late. Tom once vouched for the guy when a city contract nearly blackballed him for showing up drunk on site. Tom had said, "We all have off days." Rick's solid. And now Rick was solidly in frame, opening the door for Dina like some sleazy concierge, glancing over his shoulder like a teenager shoplifting whiskey. The video showed her laughing, tossing her purse onto the bed. Then Rick followed her in, and the door closed with a soft click. Tom didn't flinch, didn't curse, didn't throw anything. He just closed the video window, dragged the file onto a flash drive, and labeled it in permanent marker. Ghost Davy. He tucked it into the same cigar box with the spreadsheets and timeline notes. The garage freezer was starting to look more like a crime lab than a place to store chicken thighs. Back inside, Tom opened his desk drawer, found the envelope marked Legal, 2018, and pulled out the copy of his will. Dina's name was on page 2. Beneficiary. Co-owner. Power of attorney. Not anymore. He grabbed a pen and began scratching notes in the margin, addresses to remove, contacts to notify. He didn't need a lawyer for the basics. He was the guy who used to catch corner cutters on city blueprints with a red pen and a memory like a steel trap. That afternoon, he called Diane. She answered on the second ring. "Tom?" she asked, her voice clipped and businesslike. She always sounded like she was halfway through filing something. "Hey, Diane. You still handling property transfers?" "Sure do. For family or revenge." Tom didn't laugh. Let's call it risk mitigation. Gotcha. A pause. Want it quiet? Always. I'll get the documents started. Email me the lot number and her full name. If it's joint title, we'll nudge it out clean. Tom nodded. I'll drop it off in person. I don't want any digital trails. She whistled. Damn, you're really doing this old school. Old school never leaks. He hung up and pulled the manila folder labeled Aunt Ruth's house. Paid off. Clean title. Never touched by Dina's name because she always said the place gave her the creeps. Perfect. That night, Dina came home humming. Her voice slightly slurred, cheeks flushed. She kicked off her heels at the door and said something about a networking happy hour that went surprisingly deep. Tom, at the sink, nodded slowly. Deep, huh? Yeah, she giggled, already halfway to the stairs. God, you wouldn't believe how many drunk engineers flirt when you say you love reinforced concrete. He turned off the faucet. Sounds like a riot. She blew him a kiss over her shoulder. You missed out, babe. He dried his hands. Not really. After she vanished into the bedroom, Tom opened the liquor cabinet, not for a drink, but for the small black folder tucked behind the bourbon. Inside was the signed retainer from his estate attorney, a contact Diane had recommended. By 9:17 p.m., the will had been scanned, the updates filed, and the draft ready. Dina's name? Officially erased from every account, trust, and deed. Tom went to bed, lay down beside the same woman who'd smiled her way into a hotel room with a man Tom once defended, once called family. And when she turned toward him in the dark, mumbling something soft and forgettable, Tom didn't respond. Because some ghosts don't haunt you. You keep them in a flash drive, in a freezer, under a stack of butchered promises, waiting for the right morning to thaw them out. Friday morning, she came down in yoga pants, oversized sunglasses, and a smirk like she'd just booked a front row seat to a private joke. Suitcase by the door, her phone already in selfie mode. Girls' weekend, Dina said, tossing her keys in the air like a cheerleader. Spa wine, no boys allowed. Tom was buttering toast. He didn't even blink. Sounds therapeutic. She came over, kissed him on the cheek like she hadn't been screwing his dignity into motel mattresses, and said, "Don't wait up." He smiled. Wouldn't dream of it. Her SUV pulled out at 9:07 a.m. He watched it vanish down the street, let the silence soak for a moment, then walked over to the drawer under the hallway mirror, pulled out a notepad labeled Sweep Day, and began. First stop, the front door. He replaced the deadbolt entirely. No rekeying. A new set from the hardware store 2 towns over, paid in cash. The old keys went into the garbage disposal, ground down to metal confetti. Alarm code? Changed. Not just digits, protocol. He set up remote access under a new username, linked only to a burner email he'd created the night she first missed the train and got home at 2:30 a.m. with no shoes and a new excuse. By 10:03 a.m., the security company had confirmed the change. He even added motion-triggered cameras to the driveway and back fence, with cloud sync straight to his private server. Then came the home office. Dina never used it. Said it made her feel old. But she loved storing things there. Joint tax files, shared statements, her own messy pile of important stuff that looked like the aftermath of a raccoon and a paper shredder getting into a fistfight. Tom walked in, closed the door, and opened every drawer. Anything with both their names, scanned, saved to his encrypted USB, then shredded. Anything with just hers, stacked neatly into a banker's box marked personal, which he slid into the garage corner like unwanted luggage. The safe under the printer? Cleared. The backup drive she didn't know existed? Gone. By noon, every paper trail worth following ended at his name. The mortgage? Refiled under his trust. The cars? Already reassigned. The utilities? All in his name. He even downgraded the cable package, because the woman who came home smelling like gin and someone else's cologne didn't get to watch Real Housewives in high definition anymore. By 2 p.m., he stood in the living room and did a slow rotation, eyes scanning for anything that still screamed hers. The photo wall caught him. Family pictures. Vacations. Her parents. Their wedding day. Her in ivory. Him in disbelief. He took down the whole collage. Not to destroy it. Not yet. He just set the frames aside, leaving behind small, ghostly outlines on the paint. The only photo he left hanging was the one of her and her sister at Niagara Falls, posing with matching cocktails and fake surprise. Why? Because it was the only one she dusted. And even then, only when her sister was coming to visit. Tom stood there a moment longer, then opened the downstairs closet and pulled out the duffel he'd packed 3 days earlier, his essentials. Clothes, documents, cash, flash drives, the retainer letter from Diane. He carried it out to the truck and drove, not to a hotel, not to a friend's place. He went to the small, overlooked house his Aunt Ruth left him, the one Dina called a drafty little dump with creepy curtains. It was spotless. He'd spent the past week prepping it in silence. Furnished, clean, secure, new mattress, clean sheets, fresh paint, and no Dina. Tom spent the night there with a scotch and a notebook, rewriting the timeline one last time. He checked the cameras before bed, watched the footage of her checking into the spa, all smiles and duck-lipped selfies. She thought she was escaping. She didn't realize she was evacuating. Tom didn't slam any doors, didn't throw out her stuff. He just removed her from the infrastructure. She still had the clothes, the shoes, the lipsticks, but the marriage? That was already dust, and she never noticed the vacuum running. The short-term rental wasn't much. 2-bedroom, beige walls, faint smell of old furniture and bleach. But it was quiet, clean, and, most importantly, untraceable to Dina. The lease was in Gary's name, utilities prepaid, Wi-Fi routed through a VPN Gary set up, just in case. Tom moved in on a Wednesday. By Friday, it looked like he'd lived there for months. No framed memories. No decorative pillows. No trace of compromise. He brought only what mattered: his paperwork, his tools, his flash drives, and the same coffee mug he used the day after she whispered, "Don't ask." Back at the main house, he left one thing behind. On the desk in the home office, placed right where her laptop usually sat, was a small black USB drive labeled Thursday in red marker. He didn't even bother hiding it. He wanted her to see it, wanted her to hesitate, panic, wonder what that Thursday meant. Because when people start guessing which day you know about, they confess more than you ever had to ask. After checking the house cams one last time, Tom made one more call. Not to his lawyer, not to Gary, to Nancy Turner, Rick's wife. The woman who, according to Facebook, still posted Bible verses on Tuesdays and crockpot recipes on Sundays. The woman who sent Dina a Christmas card last year with a handwritten note. "We should double date sometime." He found her number buried in an old holiday contact list. Took a deep breath. Hit dial. She answered on the second ring. "Hello. Hi. Nancy Turner. Speaking. It's Tom. Tom Calhoun." Silence. Then a sharp intake of breath. "Is this about Rick?" Tom didn't blink. "Yes." Another pause. This one heavier. "What did you do?" Tom kept his voice steady. "Same thing he's been doing. This time with my wife." She didn't gasp. Didn't cry. Just exhaled. "Of course it's Dina," she muttered. "God, I knew it." She always smiled too hard, like she was already tasting the fallout. Tom didn't interrupt. He let the moment rot in her mouth. "I want to meet," she said. "Somewhere neutral." They picked a cafe with no cameras. Not because they had something to hide, but because neither of them wanted to be seen playing chess in public. Nancy showed up early, hair pinned back. No makeup, eyes puffy but sharp. She didn't ask for details. She already had her own. He used to talk about her like she was some kind of motivational speaker, she said, sipping plain black coffee like it was her first taste of rage. Said she understood his stress. Tom slid a manila folder across the table. Inside, printouts, stills, receipts, a few low-res screenshots of the two lovebirds entering Tri-Point Suites. Nancy didn't flinch. She didn't need proof. She just needed the green light. "I have something too," she said, reaching into her purse. "He doesn't know I have it. Recorded it last month. He was on speaker with her. Thought I was outside with the kids." She placed a small voice recorder on the table and hit play. Dina's voice, breathy, smug. "Your wife still clueless?" "Mine's got no idea. Honestly, I could come home in someone else's boxers and he'd probably fold them." Rick chuckled. "He's too nice. That's why you always come back. Guilt makes people predictable." Tom stared at the recorder, face unreadable. He reached out, Pause the playback. Can I keep that? Nancy nodded. Make a copy. Burn it. Play it at her funeral. I don't care. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Nancy leaned in. What's your plan? Tom smiled, not big, not cruel. Just calm. I don't want revenge. I want closure. But on my terms. Nancy nodded. Then let's make sure they hear the doors slam from both sides. They left the cafe without shaking hands. No ceremony. No promises. Just mutual understanding between two people who'd both been turned into props in someone else's drama. Tom drove back to the rental, uploaded the recording to his encrypted drive, then labeled it. Guilt_is_predictable.wave. The chessboard was nearly set. And Tom? He wasn't playing to win. He was playing to end the game. The garage door didn't open. That was the first sign. Dina sat in her SUV for a full 10 seconds, pointing the remote like maybe the batteries were low, like the universe owed her one last lazy Sunday glide into her double-car sanctuary. She tried it again. Nothing. She squinted at the house. Lights off. Porch dim. Her favorite garden lights. Gone. She got out and walked to the front door, heels clicking like gunshots on the concrete. Inserted her key. Turned. Stopped. Turned again. The lock didn't budge. For a second, she laughed. Out loud. Just a short, stupid sound, because things like this didn't happen to her. She had the keys. She lived here. She tried the key again, this time jamming it harder like the brass would suddenly remember who she was. Still nothing. Then the unease crept in. Slow, like water seeping under a door. She pressed her face to the side window. The kitchen was visible in the low streetlight glow. The table was cleared. Except, no, there was something. Papers. Stacked. Neat. And just beside them, cardboard boxes. 2 of them. Her handwriting on the labels, accessories, and winter shoes. She stepped back like the glass had burned her. She called Tom. Straight to voicemail. Again. Straight to voicemail. The third time, the call didn't even ring. That's when she dropped the phone back into her purse and muttered, "Oh, hell no." 20 minutes later, she screeched into Gary's driveway, half blinded with rage. He opened the door before she even knocked, arms folded, expression the human equivalent of a shrug. "Where the hell is Tom?" she demanded. Gary tilted his head. "Nice to see you too, Dina. Don't play with me. My keys don't work. My phone's not going through. What is this?" He stepped aside, not to let her in, just to make her look small. "You should talk to your husband," he said calmly. "I would if he wasn't ghosting me like some little coward." Gary smiled. Not kindly. "He asked me to give you this." He handed her a folded paper. On it, an address. That was all. No note. No context. Just a street, a house number, and a city block she hadn't thought about in years. She stared at it. "Is this a joke?" Gary shrugged. "Looks real to me." "What's there?" Gary didn't blink. "Closure. Probably not the kind you're used to." Dina narrowed her eyes. He wouldn't dare. But her voice cracked. And Gary caught it. "You thought you were married to a doormat," he said, stepping back inside. Turns out, it was a landmine. Then he shut the door. No slam. No theatrics. Just the soft click of a man who'd been waiting years for that line. Back in her SUV, Dina sat gripping the wheel with both hands, chest rising and falling too fast. She could feel it now. Something had shifted. The house wasn't just locked. She'd been extracted. Tom hadn't thrown a tantrum. He'd executed a plan. And for the first time in years, Dina realized she wasn't in control of the script. She was in the script. A supporting character. And the main act was already waiting for her at a house she barely remembered. Waiting with answers she'd never planned to hear. The gravel driveway crackled under Dina's tires as she pulled up to the one place she thought she'd never have to see again, the house Tom inherited from his Aunt Ruth. The cobweb shack, as she used to call it. She hadn't been here in over a decade, and even then, she stayed in the car, complaining about the smell of mothballs and antique depression. It looked the same. White paint peeling at the edges. A porch swing that moved just slightly in the wind, like it had a nervous tick. But the front door was unlocked. She stepped inside, heels echoing on hardwood that hadn't felt her presence in 15 years. The air smelled like lemon cleaner and consequences. "Tom," she called, smoothing her jacket like she was walking into a spa lobby instead of a memory she'd left for dead. "This isn't funny." No answer. She moved toward the living room and stopped. Because sitting on the couch, calm as a loaded gun, was Nancy Turner. Next to her, Rick. He didn't look at Dina. His eyes were fixed on the coffee table like it might swallow him whole. His leg jittered. His hands clasped together like he was trying to hold something in. Dina opened her mouth to speak, but Nancy beat her to it. "You really thought you'd walk into a conversation," Nancy said, voice low, perfectly still. "You didn't. You walked into a presentation." Dina's mouth tightened. "Where's Tom?" Nancy ignored the question. Picked up a small remote. "This is from April 17th, she said. Tri-Point Suites. Audio and visual. Let's not pretend it's CGI." Dina took a step back. "You can't just..." But Nancy had already pressed play. The TV screen flickered to life. Low-resolution footage filled the room, angled from a hallway camera. There they were, Dina and Rick, laughing, holding hands. Her leaning in with that fake shy look she always used when she wanted to seem innocent while plotting something that would burn someone else's life down. They entered the hotel room. Door shut. Cut to audio. Dina's voice, clear, soaked in amusement. "Honestly, I could come home in your socks and Tom would probably fold them. He still thinks I'm loyal. It's cute, in a hospice kind of way." Rick's voice, he's soft. "You said it yourself. Predictable. Easy to manage." The room went dead silent. Dina's arms had gone limp. Her mouth opened slightly. No words. No excuses. Just collapse in slow motion. Nancy paused the recording and looked at her. "I brought Rick," she said calmly, "because I wanted him to watch this next part with someone who still remembers what it's like to be humiliated by people who confuse silence with stupidity." She turned to her husband. "You told me I was crazy, that I was paranoid, that I needed therapy." Rick didn't respond. Dina turned to leave, but Nancy was already standing. "Sit. We're not done. You wanted to play with people's lives like they were audition reels? This is your callback. And this time," she pointed to the screen, "you don't get to edit the footage." Dina sat. Not by choice. Her legs gave out and landed her in a chair that creaked under the weight of her ego finally catching up with her. Rick still hadn't said a word. Nancy pressed play again. This time, the audio was from Rick's phone, recorded weeks earlier, in the Turner kitchen. Rick, whispering to Dina over speakerphone, "We just need 2 more months. I'll say the promotion was stressful, she won't question it. Dina, and Tom's got that new retirement account. He doesn't even check the balance. I could siphon 10 grand for home renovations and he'd probably thank me. Rick, so we play nice. 2 months. Then we make our move." The file ended. Nancy looked at them both. Her voice didn't shake. "You made your move." She picked up her purse, walked to the door, stopped. "I hope the room's warm," she said. "Because hell is too." And then she left, leaving Dina and Rick alone, sitting in the stale, electric quiet. One betrayed, one exposed, and both knowing this wasn't even the final scene. The audio was still playing when the door creaked open. Dina didn't turn. She couldn't. Her body had gone rigid in the armchair, posture locked like a child caught red-handed. Rick flinched, finally breaking his trance. The steps were measured, deliberate. No rush, no stomping, just the quiet tread of inevitability walking into the room. Tom appeared in the doorway, not a wrinkle out of place. Same dark jacket he wore to city inspections. Same calm face he wore at her father's funeral. Only this time, the grief wasn't someone else's. He didn't look at the TV. Didn't need to. He walked to the coffee table. Slowly. Set down a large envelope, cream-colored, sealed with a single red sticker, like a wax stamp in a modern war. Then he turned to leave. "Tom." Dina's voice cracked like glass under pressure. He paused in the doorway. She reached for the envelope with shaking hands and pulled it open like it might explode. Inside, a notarized affidavit of separation. Formal asset reassignment documents. Power of attorney revocation. A cease contact clause so surgically worded, it read like a legal scalpel. Dina read the first line 3 times. Her lips moved, but no words came out. She looked up, pale. You planned all this." Tom finally looked at her. Not with rage, not with heartbreak, with precision. "The night you said, 'Don't ask,'" he said, voice flat. "I didn't." He walked one step closer. "I acted." She looked back down at the paperwork. Like maybe the words would rearrange themselves into something softer. But they didn't. Section 3. Effective immediately, Party A, Thomas Calhoun, ceases all co-responsibility of shared debts, titles, and access rights associated with Party B, Dina M. Calhoun. Section 6. All items belonging solely to Party B have been labeled, boxed, and are available for pickup by third-party courier or at Party A's discretion. Section 9. Under no circumstance shall Party B initiate verbal, written, or digital communication after execution of this agreement. Any such contact will be considered harassment under local and state law. She looked up again. This is insane. You can't just vanish me out of your life like this. Tom tilted his head. You vanished yourself. I'm just filing the paperwork. Rick stood, mouth open like he was about to say something, then sat back down, the weight of failure finally pulling him into silence. Tom looked at him briefly. Nice to see you again, Rick. Still borrowing things you don't return, I see. Rick looked away. Dina stood now, arms trembling. You're overreacting. We can talk, you're being. Tom cut her off. Calm. Quiet. No, Dina. You talked. For years. You lied. Smiled through it. Gaslit me until I started doubting what I knew in my bones. I don't want another explanation. I don't want closure. He picked up the remote from the floor and clicked the audio off. Silence filled the room like concrete. I want consequence, he said. Then he looked around the room once more, like a man double-checking the last items on a checklist. I'll have a courier pick up your boxes tomorrow. You can leave Rick here or take him with you. He's not my problem anymore. Tom turned, walked back toward the front door. Just before stepping out, he added, This house was my aunt's. She left it to me because she said I had a good memory. I never told you that. Dina blinked. Why does that matter? Tom looked over his shoulder. Because some of us don't forget the people who try to erase us. Then he stepped outside, closed the door, and left her inside with Rick, the silence, and the weight of a life that had finally, irrevocably, collapsed inward. The engine's off, but Dina doesn't move. She's been parked in the driveway of the short-term rental for almost 20 minutes, staring at the garage door like it might blink first. The sun's gone down. The sky's that sickly gray between too late and too early, and there's condensation building up on her windshield like the house itself is exhaling. The porch light flickers. She never figured out how to change the bulb. Her phone rests in her lap, screen cracked, case scratched, battery low. She's already called Tom 6 times. The first time, she tried the sweet voice. Can we please just talk? The second time, she cried. Not for him. For herself. The third time, she screamed. By the 6th, she just stared at the ringing screen until it went dead. No voicemail. No response. Just the void where his patience used to live. Across the street, a neighbor walks a dog. Dina ducks slightly, ashamed without understanding why. She opens the door, steps out slowly, like the gravel might betray her. The rental's key digs into her palm. Too small, too light, too temporary. She walks to the front door, unlocks it, steps inside. It smells like her own perfume and failure. Her suitcase still sits by the stairs, half unpacked, as if even her belongings aren't fully committed to her anymore. She drops her purse on the floor, slips off her shoes, walks into the kitchen. The wine rack's empty. The fridge has a single bottle of almond milk and a Tupperware container of takeout pad thai she no longer remembers ordering. She leans on the counter, staring at the tile. Then her phone buzzes. Just once. A new message. From an unlisted number. No text. Just a video file. She taps it. It loads. Footage from a hotel hallway. Blurry. Overhead camera. Timestamp. 3:58 a.m. Dina, clearly intoxicated, staggering into view. Laughing. Loud. Then, you know what's funny? She slurs to Rick, off camera. Tom knows. He always knows. But he won't ask. He's too scared I'll say yes. She stumbles. Presses her hands to the wall. Smirks. I could tell him I slept with you in our bed, and he'd thank me for being honest. She laughs again. It's ugly. Crooked. Then the screen fades to black. A single caption appears in white text. You told me not to ask. So I answered. She doesn't realize she's dropped the phone until she hears it hit the tile. She slides down the cabinet. knees pulled to her chest, fingers shaking. Rick's gone. Nancy took the kids and the house and the future. Tom disappeared so quietly she can't even remember when the silence started. All that's left is an empty house that smells like someone else's victory. And a video reminder that for once in her life, she said too much on record. Outside, the wind picks up. She hears the porch light click out for the last time. And she finally understands. Tom never needed to shout. He just needed her to listen after it was already over.